Hi guys, welcome back. In this lesson we're going to look at intervals. An interval can be defined as the distance between two notes. As a jazz pianist, you need to have a solid understanding of intervals so that you can build chords quickly and improvise freely on the piano. If you're new to jazz piano, you might find this lesson quite technical, so try not to get caught up in the theory. The main purpose of this lesson is to introduce you to the concept of intervals, so that you're familiar with the interval names when covered in later lessons. So all intervals contain a number and a prefix. The number tells you how big the interval is. Looking at the C major scale, the interval from C to D contains two pitches, C and D. So that makes this a second interval. The interval from D to A contains five pitches, D, E, F, G, and A. So that makes this a fifth interval. The second part of the interval name is the prefix. So there's 5 different prefixes which give you more information about the interval. These prefixes are major, minor, perfect, diminished, and augmented. More on these later in the video. So in order to work out interval names quickly, you need to understand the concept of half and whole steps. A half step, which is also known as a semitone, is where you play 2 adjacent keys on the piano. Examples would include C to D flat and E to F. A whole step, which is also known as a tone, is made up of 2 half steps, so there's always a note in between. Examples would include C to D and E to F sharp. So all the intervals can be measured in terms of whole and half steps, so it's important that you understand the meaning of these 2 terms. I'm now going to explain each interval from smallest to largest and provide real examples of how they occur in the context of jazz piano. So the smallest of all intervals is the minor second. The minor second is an interval of half a step. So you'll find minor second intervals in closed position minor ninth voicings. Here's a closed position C minor 9 voicing. And we can see that we have that minor second interval in the middle of the chord. So next we have the major second. A major second is an interval of 1 whole step or 2 half steps. So the major second, it sounds slightly brighter than the minor second, but it still has quite a dense sound to it. An example of a major second interval in a chord would be a closed position major 9th voicing. So here's a closed position C major 9 voicing. So the minor and major second interval, they add a bit of dissonance to closed position voicings and create a nice jazzy sound. So next we have the minor third and the major third. So the minor third is an interval of 1.5 steps. You could also look at this as 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3. And the major third is an interval of 2 steps, or 4 half steps. So minor and major thirds are the basic building blocks for triads, 7th chords, and other extended chords. You'll find them in minor triads, minor 7th chords, and minor 9ths, and also in major triads, major 7th chords, and major 9th chords. So in the lessons on triads and 7th chords, we'll look in more detail at minor and major thirds and how they're used to create these chords. Next we have the perfect fourth interval. So the perfect fourth is an interval of 2.5 steps, or 5 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's called a perfect fourth because it's neither minor or major, so it gets the name perfect. So the perfect fourth is a very consonant sounding interval, and it's used extensively to create modern sounding fourth voicings. So a common fourth bass voicing is the so what voicing. Here it is in C. And you can see from bottom to top we have a fourth interval here, a fourth interval here, a fourth interval here, and then a major third on top. So for more information on that, check out the lesson on the so what voicing. Next we have the perfect fifth. So the perfect fifth is an interval of 3.5 steps. You could also look at this as 7 half steps. So again, it's called perfect because it's neither minor or major. So the fifth is a unique interval, as it can be played very low down on the piano without sounding too distorted. So this makes it very useful for adding depth to a chord. So there's a C minor 9 voicing with a perfect fifth in the bass. You can hear that fifth, it really adds a lot of weight to the chord. So we could also play that up here, and it still sounds good. And in fact, some voicings are built exclusively of fifths, the most common of which is the Kenny Barron voicing. So if you look at the chord on the right, so this chord is built exclusively of fifths. We have a minor second interval in the middle, which separates the two hands, but then it's 2 stacked fifths in the top and 2 stacked fifths in the bottom. So check out the lesson on the Kenny Barron voicing for more information. So you might have noticed that I missed an interval out. I showed you the perfect fourth interval, which is 2.5 steps, and the perfect fifth, which is 3.5 steps. Well, there's actually an interval of 3 steps as well, and this interval goes by 3 different names. It can be called an augmented fourth, which is a perfect fourth interval that's been raised by half a step. So you'll find this in major sharp 11 chords. It can also be called a diminished fifth interval. So I'd look at this as a perfect fifth that's been lowered by half a step. So the diminished fifth is present in diminished triads, diminished seventh chords, and minor 7 flat 5 chords. So the final name that is used to describe the interval of 3 whole steps is a tritone. So this is probably the most common one that you'll hear. So the tritone is present in all dominant 7th chords. So here's a C7, C dominant 7 chord, and we can see that from E to B flat, that's 3 whole steps. That creates the tritone interval that gives the dominant chord its very tense and unstable sound. So it's this tritone that makes the chord want to resolve to a major chord a fifth away. So you can also play the dominant 7th chord like this, and again we have the tritone interval here, giving it that tense unstable quality. Okay, great. So next we have the augmented fifth and the minor 6th. So again, these 2 intervals are both 4 whole steps. The augmented fifth, I'd look at this as a fifth interval that's been raised by half a step, and the augmented fifth is present in augmented triads and augmented 7th chords. So the minor 6th, that's also an interval of 4 whole steps, but I'd look at it as a major 6th interval that's been lowered by half a step. So the major 6th is an interval of 4.5 steps. It's a half step bigger than the minor 6th. So what's confusing about the major 6th is that it's used for both major 6 chords. So here we have the roots, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 6th. So it's used for major 6th chords and also minor 6th chords. So here we have the roots, the minor 3rd, the 5th, and the 6th. So it would make more sense if it was called a perfect 6th, because it's used for both major and minor 6 chords, but it's called a major 6, so just accept that it is. Okay, next we have the minor 7th and the major 7th. So the minor 7th is an interval of 5 whole steps, and it's used to create minor 7th chords. The major 7th is an interval of 5.5 whole steps, and it's used to create major 7th chords. So finally, the last interval is the octave. So the octave marks the next occurrence of the same note, higher or lower on the keyboard. So you can see when we're at C, the first time we get back to C again, that's an octave up. And if we go below, that's an octave below. So octaves are very useful for adding weight to either a melody or a bass line. Right, so let's have a recap of the prefixes and which intervals they are relevant to. So we have the minor and major prefixes, which refer to major second, minor second, major third, minor third, major 6th, minor 6th, and major 7th and minor 7th. The perfect prefixes only apply to 4th and 5th intervals. So we have the perfect 4th and the perfect 5th. The diminished prefix only applies to the diminished 5th. So get the 5th and lower it by half a step. And the augmented prefix, which is the opposite of diminished, applies to the 4th and the 5th. So we have the augmented 4th and the augmented 5th. So remember that this lesson was just to introduce you to the interval names. Don't worry about learning them all at this stage, just try and familiar yourself with the names of them. Cheers guys, thanks for watching, see you all next time.